Author, content creator Isabel Brown breaks down how Gen Z can help save America on this episode of United Patriots Uprising with Gary Benford. I'm your host, Gary Benford. Thanks for joining us. This podcast can be found at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can also see the video version on Rumble and YouTube. And wherever you get it, please hit that notification button, subscribe, and let us know you're there. Oh boy, let's see. Woke, cancel culture, snowflakes, your truth is your truth. You can be any gender you want to be. Just name it and claim it. Wow. Do you know, back in my day, if people had said things like that, they probably would have been institutionalized. But that's not the America we live in today. But my guest, she does not subscribe to any of this. In fact, she's here to tell us that her generation, Gen Z, is going to help bring our nation out of this and into sanity, back into conservatism. Boy, I hope she's right. Wrote a book about it. You ready to hear? Well, let's get into it. She's a rising Gen Z star who works tirelessly to empower her generation to embrace conservative values and to help fight for our future. Not just the future now, but the future to come. You've seen her all over national television, all over national radio. She's a requested speaker at college campuses and high schools, and she's been on the cover of Newsweek. I welcome to the show content creator and the author of the book, The End of the Alphabet, How Gen Z Can Save America, Isabel Brown. How are you, Isabel?
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And I am elated to have you because it's all hands on deck right now. All hands on deck because we have a country to save. So before we get into the problems of America and how Gen Z can help get this done, please tell me, how did you survive the wokeness trap, the Marxist trap, the cancel culture trap, or the trap that has seemed to have captivated and captured and encompassed so many young people today?
You know, I never in a million years would have dreamed that this would be my career today, working in content creation and politics and doing public speaking across the country. I wanted to be a surgeon, and I pursued my degree in biomedical sciences at Colorado State University in my home state of Colorado, and then the policy side of BMS at Georgetown for my graduate education. And I discovered very, very quickly in my undergraduate years that the reason I loved science, the pursuit of objective truth, really wasn't being honored in a lot of my classes. Instead, in organic chemistry and anatomy and physiology, I was spending a lot more time arguing with my professors about their political opinions, or being told your chromosomes have nothing to do with your gender, even though we just taught you that for the test, that abortion did not end a genetically unique human life, or even that it was scientifically impossible for God to have created the universe. And I found myself in the midst of the insanity of the 2015, 2016 era with the Trump campaign first coming onto the scene, right smack dab in the middle of one of these insane leftist-oriented college campuses, and looked around at a sea of 33,000 other students, not seeing anyone share my values publicly, at the very least, in our campus community. I decided to do something about that when I was in college and started a club on campus for intellectual dialogue, to bring speakers to campus, to challenge the Marxist narrative, and certainly made quite the reputation for myself along the way, being known as that conservative girl on my campus. Got all of the backlash and the death threats and the whole nine, but really saw a movement and a revolution happening on our college campus in Fort Collins, Colorado, of all places, where those older than myself, millennials, began graduating off of campuses. And the next group of people, Gen Z, started coming into the fold. I'm the first year of Gen Z, born in 1997. And I watched a seismic shift happen in the priorities and the values and really the curiosity of the students around me, not wanting to just blindly accept the Marxist narrative, but instead to question things with a natural skepticism, desperately hungry for events with people like Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens and Dennis Prager, who we invited to come speak on our campus, drawing crowds of literally thousands of people, just excited to hear a difference of opinion and challenge their own perspective, which is what education is supposed to be all about. I actually wrote my first book that I self-published in 2021 about my college experience. And boy, was it crazy. That book is called Frontlines. But I fell in love with activism. I fell in love with facilitating these conversations and being a voice for truth, the same way I would have done as a scientist, but in a totally different arena, and decided to take that into the digital space after I graduated. Now my job is still working with Gen Zers every single day, but here where we spend all of our time on social media, and instead of interacting with tens of thousands of other students, I'm interacting with tens of millions of Gen Zers all over the world who are all experiencing living in what I call the upside down in the 2020s, where nothing makes sense, lies have become truth, men are women and women are men, and we're desperate for that exact thing that was such a void we filled on my college campus, that pursuit of objective truth.
That's a great answer. And I guess I assume you never were a liberal because, my thing being born black, all you know is liberalism and they're supposed to help us. They never do that. But then I became a Christian born again in 1997. And it just completely changed my points of view. But I didn't even know any conservatives prior to becoming a Christian. Were you raised conservative from conservative parents, or were you a liberal and you just got red pilled?
I was always raised pretty conservative, which honestly, I think a lot of people think sounds like a boring story, that this has always been how you were raised and your foundational values. I think it's powerful that there are so many people my age who grew up with these values because it showed how much our parents cared about getting us involved in the process early on in life. I certainly was politically oriented and passionate about politics, but didn't really dive in and take the plunge for myself on being on offense in politics until college. And I did a few internships, one for the US Senate and one for the White House for the Trump administration, and just was hooked from there. But I'm actually at my parents' house right now in Colorado doing some speaking events for my book tour. And sitting in our basement, you can see there's a massive bookshelf of books behind me, all stuff that we were expected to read as kids. And my parents really took on an offense role in parenting and had a rule at our house that I really appreciate now as an adult, that there was no such thing as a kids' table. Myself and my two younger sisters were always expected to sit with the adults at family dinners, at big holidays. If we went out with family friends, we were expected to know what was going on in the world, and we could form our own opinions about things, certainly, but we were engaged in lively debate all the time. And maybe that's because I was raised by two Catholic lawyers, so we loved talking about politics and religion around the dinner table. But I noticed when I showed up for my first day of college in the fall of 2015, the vast majority of my peers had no sense of foundational values, either politically or religiously. And they blindly accepted what a lot of professors on campus said as fact because they are the experts, not realizing that there was probably an agenda behind that. So I love encouraging parents. You can never start having these conversations with your kids too early. Kids are a lot smarter than we often give them credit for. And usually those foundational values that you can establish in your home are what's going to change the world later on when they grow up.
That's a great answer, and you're great. I'm so happy that your parents were people that were able to instill those type of values, and they stuck. And Colorado, as we know, I've been there quite a lot. I used to be a sports writer here in New York, so I used to cover the New York Knicks, and they played out in Denver, and so I've been in McNichols Arena and around that area, and it can be cold, it can be snow one day, and then 80 the next day. It's Colorado is a strange state to me, and what's really gotten strange is a state that I thought was pretty conservative has just seemed to have flipped. So we definitely need you there doing what you're doing. Please tell people who don't know, what is Gen Z? What qualifies Gen Z and what makes somebody Gen Z? And, usually when you hear words like Gen X or Gen Z or millennials or everything, people are like, oh gosh, they're going to destroy the world. Well, Tell people what Gen Z is and why Gen Z is going to help save America.
Fantastic question. And I think most people in their minds, especially those older than us, kind of lump together what we call youth culture in politics, especially combining millennials and Generation Z. But the truth is, we could not be more fundamentally different in our approaches to the world, in our foundational values, in how we communicate than those who came right before us in the millennial generation. I was born, as I said, in 1997. So I'm the first year of Gen Z. I'll be turning 27 this year. And that generation spans all the way down to those born in 2012. So when we're talking about Gen Z, we're talking about a group of 70 million individuals who are about 12 to 13 years old, preteens, all the way up to our late 20s now, most of whom are yet to really be adults, have yet to graduate from high school. They might have just started college, and they're still figuring out exactly what their values are going to be, especially how they're going to vote. But I find it fascinating that we constantly hear this droning on narrative that Gen Z is destroying America, as you just mentioned, which is one of the reasons I decided to write my book. Over the last several years, I've been asked to be kind of a token voice for Gen Z, especially in American politics. I was on the cover of Newsweek magazine during the 2020 election cycle for President Trump, sporting a MAGA hat, which was very fun to see in airports across the country. I do a lot of work on Fox News and Newsmax and in print media as well, and radio. And I constantly hear from those older than myself that this group of young people is who's directly responsible for the demise of Western civilization, that it's our fault Western gender theory has become such a problem. It's our fault that our college campuses are being literally overrun by terrorists at this moment in time. It's our fault that people are blocking freeways to protest climate change. And yet, as I just mentioned, the vast majority of Gen Zers are still teenagers. They have yet to grow up. They have yet to really make their mark on
Can't
American
even vote. Can't
even
vote.
vote. Correct. So it's a very misguided sentiment to believe that this group of people can already be written off as lazy, entitled, uneducated, stupid, blue hair, emotional, scream at the sky socialists, because that's just not objectively true, especially on the culture and lifestyle choices front. I knew from my work on my own campus and from working on tens of thousands of high school and college campuses across the country in the last few years, and especially interacting with so many people in the digital space today, that that's actually the opposite of truth when it comes to our generation. And I wrote this book to set out and prove that. But the truth is, on a culture and lifestyle choices perspective, Gen Z is wildly proving ourselves to be the most conservative generation America has seen since World War II.
Please explain to people why that is true. Let's get into the book. The premise of why you wrote the book and what you want us to know, why people should get this book and get behind the Gen Z and become mentors, give our knowledge and the things that we know, because you brought up a very good point. You have minds that can go either way right now. They have not formulated opinions on life yet any more than my generation, which was the generations that really screwed things up, the sex, drug, and rock and roll generation in the 70s. Okay, when we were turning in adults, and that's when, you had the Vietnam War, it popped up, and you had all of a sudden people are turning on the police, turning on parents, and it never. Look, we're to blame for a lot of this. But the point is, people were getting into our heads then, and minds are impressionable. So, let us know what we can do to help, and the premise of the book of why this is a generation that can really help save us.
Yeah, it's funny. Over the last couple of weeks traveling the country for my book release, when I say that Gen Z is the most conservative generation we've seen in decades, most people, especially hosts of shows, will fall out of their chair when I say that. They say, how is that even possible? I'm going to try to prove you wrong. But I think all of this really starts with acknowledging the late, great Andrew Breitbart's famous quote that politics is always downstream from culture. And if you want to change what's happening in the Oval Office or the halls of Congress or who's running for president, it has to start with changing how people live their day-to-day lives. That is exactly what Generation Z is doing in rebellion of those who came before us. And I'll come back to the rebellious nature of that. But for example, 93% of Gen Zers say that we still want to get married. In the time that we have the lowest marriage rate in American history, we're realizing we don't need to spend $250,000 on a college degree in, I don't know, what's popular today. Islamic Jihad, LGBTQ plus underwater basket weaving, because that's probably not going to give us a job or success or meaning and purpose in the future. Instead, we have record high enrollment in trade schools. The Wall Street Journal just ran a great piece on that. We're choosing entrepreneurship. 62% of us have already started our own businesses. We're deleting our dating apps. We're quitting our hormonal birth control. We're moving out of big cities to smaller communities because homesteading, growing your own food and living on a little plot of land is a trend on social media. And so you're watching these radically countercultural choices being made from Gen Z, amazingly organically, in a time that the left has strategically succeeded in taking over every aspect of American culture. And that's been happening for quite some time. Just on my live stream the other day, we were rereading the 45 published goals for the Communist Party in
Right.
1963 in this country, which were read into the congressional record and were not rocket science, but were highly effective in this change culture and politics will follow perspective, to take over journalism, to take over academia, to increase the number of divorces in this country, to take over the entertainment industry. All of those pillars of culture today are feeding Gen Z Marxism, lies, a breakdown of the family, a breakdown of faith. And like every generation who came before us, every group of young people wants to do one thing throughout human history, and that is rebel against the people who came before them. You mentioned the 70s as the sex, drugs, and rock and roll generation. And I think in our minds still, because American history has been relatively so short, that's what we still consider to be radically countercultural, to stick it to the man in a punk rock band and cover your body in tattoos. But to be punk rock today, to be rock and roll and rebellious and countercultural, is to embrace timeless, traditional, conservative cultural values like marriage and family, like taking responsibility for your health instead of following all this insane obesity is good for you stuff that we're seeing. And maybe most importantly, your faith. And that's probably the most important thing that I'm seeing within our generation today. We are believing in God in greater numbers year over year, and we're seeking real substance in our faith, not this half in, half out cultural rainbow washed Christianity that I think has become so normal with millennials. In fact, look at Catholicism as just one denomination of Christianity in America. Gen Z is the most likely generation to prefer the traditional Latin Mass, which is the most insane metaphorical middle finger to our secular and constantly changing goalposts culture. We want structure, we want tradition, we want to tie to the past. And yet we're bringing all of these things forward into the future as well. So our definition of the American dream might look a little bit different. Our entrepreneurship and starting our own businesses might mean working remote and starting multiple businesses online and being more flexible as our own boss. We're not living in white picket fence homes. We're living in camper vans and traveling full time to expose our kids to the world and homeschooling them along the way. And I think it's a really beautiful blend of the traditions of the past, these timeless values, and the necessity to bring our society forward with actual progress, not progressivism that really means regress, but a true path forward to reclaim the United States of America and Western civilization moving forward.
Well, this would be beautiful if this continues. You mentioned the communist planks, the book. We talk about this all the time on this show, W. Cleon Skousen's book, The Naked Communists, and all the planks. And you nail the planks. But here's my question. Every generation, if you go back to the Frankfurt School, even going back to the 1930s, and we'll get into what's going on in the college campuses, because the Frankfurt School came over to where? Columbia University. That's where they started out and branched out this Marxist socialist bullcrap. But the point is, every generation, they've gotten further and further and further ensconced in the Marxist socialist communist plan for America. How is Gen Z able to reject and repel this when it has really, just like the blob, sucked every generation into its game plan?
That rebellion is so important because there is such a temptation to be sucked in. That is the norm. That's what mainstream culture looks like. But I think about, for example, what's happening on campuses right now. We dedicated a full multi-hour live stream on my show this week to what's happening on these campuses with the Palestine encampments. And I'm noticing a pretty common trend right now. These are highly organized, well-funded, very well-paid protests across campuses nationwide with matching tents and matching signs and matching slogans. They are told, do not talk to the media. You have media liaisons for this type of stuff. So it's very different from the organic left-wing protests that I experienced on my college campus even just a few years ago. And typically, when you see these videos going viral of people beating each other up or setting things on fire or smashing windows at Columbia or UCLA or any school in between this week, when you pause the video, most of the people engaging in this behavior are not 18 to 21. They are middle-aged individuals. They're probably paid professional agitators, and they travel from campus to campus to campus or event to event to event, just like the BLM Summer of Love protests in 2020, to just create chaos in any way that they possibly can. On the flip side of that, what I'm seeing with young people is in natural rebellion to this insanity. There was a photo that went incredibly viral this week from the University of North Carolina, where older protesters, not students, attempted to rip down the American flag and put up the Palestinian flag instead. And a group of all people, fraternity brothers, were walking through campus completely outraged by this, ran over, and there was about a dozen of them that stood there holding the American flag above their heads so that it wouldn't be desecrated or touch the ground, while dozens of people are throwing things at them and pelting things at them. Yesterday at Ole Miss, there was a new attempt to start an encampment in the middle of their campus, mostly of older people and about a dozen people surrounded by more than 1,000 students in a circle around this encampment, proudly laughing, joyful, and singing the national anthem together in unison to tell these people to get off our campus, get out of our community. You do not represent our values. So what I think is really interesting and a perfect illustration of what the left is doing right now with these protests and everything else is that they're setting up camp literally on college campuses and on social media, trying to use youth as the facade and the poster child for what message they are trying to spread in America. They're trying to tell you college students, young people, Gen Z, all support Palestine, all support Hamas, all hate Israel, all want an end to free speech, all want death to America. And yet, in the face of that, young people ourselves are rebelling out of necessity because nobody is accurately reporting our voice from those older than us. And we're having to speak up for ourselves in whatever way we can. That doesn't always look like singing the national anthem on campus. Sometimes that looks like running for office ourselves. That looks like becoming content creators ourselves. It's a really powerful time. And the primary reason I wrote this book is to give specific opportunities for leadership and a pathway to success for people in our own generation to realize that we have more influence today, thanks to this magical device in our pocket, perhaps even than the president of the United States, mass news organizations, our college campuses, if we're willing to just stand up for ourselves, to fight for our country, and to tell the truth.
I hear you. You know, being that you're not that long out of college, has it dawned on some of these students, like when you're looking at what's going on now, all this unrest, it's really infighting all on the left, because in these Ivy League schools, all the professors are leftists, most of the students are leftists. So what you have leftist Jews now finding out that the people within their own political party don't particularly like them, and there's no help. There are no Christians there. There's no conservative professors. There are no Trump type people to back you up. So now you're getting pummeled by, all the Soros and everybody that's bringing in all these agitators. And we can't help you because we're not on campus. Are they really starting to, and could this start to change the way some people think, or are they going to stay on the left?
I don't think they're going to stay on the left. And I think you're watching a mass exodus of the left. There was another protest that happened this week at the University of Alabama. And on one side of a walkway were a bunch of Trump supporting Republicans. And on the other side of a walkway were their counter protesters, liberals. And yet in unison at the exact same time, both parties were chanting F Joe Biden as loud as they possibly could. So I think you really are seeing this exodus from the left because classical liberals are realizing that classically liberal democratic values are no longer shared by today's Democrat Party. It's really become authoritarian leftism. But I don't necessarily think that means a massive swing to the Republican Party, as much as I think I'm seeing that swing to conservative values and conservative principles. In fact, of
Yeah.
newly registered voters, the younger cohort of Gen Z just now graduating from high school or starting college, more than 53% of them are self-registering as independent with a capital I. And I think that freaks a lot of people out. They think, oh my gosh, we haven't won them over quite yet. They don't share our values. And so a lot of people in the Republican Party wing of American politics are writing off these young independents, thinking we've already lost them. But I see this as a beautiful avenue of hope moving forward, because not only is this an exodus of the idea young people automatically have to be leftists, it's a renaissance of critical thinking in American politics again, to actually have candidates that support your values instead of blindly voting down ticket and seeing what I like to call a uniparty in Washington, D.C., where frankly, Republicans and Democrats are two sides of the exact same coin in Congress at this point in time. They're both voting to send all of our tax dollars abroad. They're both voting to restrict our freedom of speech and shut down our favorite social media platforms. It's really the same MO on both sides, and that's to retain power and stay in office themselves. So I'm really encouraged by this conservative independent renaissance within this next generation.
Great answer. The name of the book is The End of the Alphabet, How Gen Z Can Save America. Isabel, before I ask you to tell people how they can contact you and where to get your book, give them one reason they should buy your book. Why should people get this book?
This book is primarily for Gen Zers. So if you are a Gen Zer or you have a Gen Zer in your life and you want to encourage the next generation of leadership, please consider picking up a copy. But maybe even more importantly, our secondary audience is everyone who's been fed this lie, this mainstream narrative about who this next generation is. We could all use a lot more hope going into November and the rest of the 2020s to fight for our country and to save Western civilization. And the truth is, the very foundation of our country has always relied on young people speaking truth to power in this radically rebellious way. Our founding fathers on July 4th, 1776, were not decrepit 90-year-olds dying in their seats in the American Congress. They were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And I love seeing that 2024 is really turning into a 1776 moment for this country. It falls down on the shoulders of Generation Z. So it's time to give us a seat at the table, hand us the microphone, and really promote this cross-generational dialogue that will be the saving grace from the left's attempts to destroy America from the inside out.
Thank you. Isabel, it has been a pleasure talking to you and a delight, just like I knew it would. Please tell people where they can get your book and anything else you'd like to promote. I am just totally stunned how you do your show 4 days a week for 4 hours at a clip. Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
We live stream every day, and you can watch our live stream at 3 p.m. Eastern-ish, it depends on the day, for a couple of hours across social media platforms. You can find me almost anywhere at The Isabel Brown, and pick up a copy of my book anywhere books are sold, in person at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, or anywhere else.
Isabel, keep up the good fight, because it's all hands on deck. And thank you for coming on. You're always welcome to return. And keep speaking truth to power.
Thank you.
There you have it, everybody. Isabel Brown. And boy, she's a warrior. And please support her. I want to thank Isabel Brown for coming on the show and giving us a reason not to give up on the younger generation. And she made a very good point, everybody, that when you're between the ages of 15 and 25, you really don't know what you know. You know what you think you know, but your mind isn't completely made up. You can change your mind about a lot of things. I know we did. So let's not give up on Gen Z. I think she's right about that. This generation is there for the taking. So let's take it. Conservative, Christian, let's take it. We the people, let's take them and bring them in. Constitutional, republic. And get them away, keep them away from the Marxist, socialists, communists that are trying to take them down that rabbit hole for the destruction of our country. So I thank Isabel Brown again for coming on and giving us a reason to get behind this young generation, to mentor them and help to encourage them to help us save America. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Hope you subscribe to it, leave a rating and a review. Video version you can see at Rumble and YouTube. Also, hit the subscribe button wherever you get it and hit your notification button so every Tuesday when a podcast drops, it shall be sent to you. There's also an archive audio, 3 years of podcasts on audio. You go to radioinfluence.com or even wherever you get this podcast, you'll see it on the page. Look at the archive, look at some of the guests, just to give you some of the guests that have been on. Drew Thomas Allen, Christina Bobb, Clay Clark, Monica Crowley, Kira Davis, Professor Nicholas Giordano, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Michael Loftus, Kevin McGarry, A.J. Rice, Brandon Tatum, Christian Watson, Pierre Wilson, Will Witt, Naomi Wolf, and Kenny Chu, just among the many who have come on and giving us a conservative point of view, looking to keep our country free. Okay? So please check that out. Well, that's it for now, everybody. So until the next time, this is your host, Gary Benford, saying God bless you, God bless your families, and God, please help us bless America.